We might just make a start.
It's okay. Yeah.
Okay, so from Albury, or was it Wangaratta? I don't know why I keep saying Albury. These girls are Bella and Holly. They're Sometimes Confused Girls, and they'll be performing some of their original songs.
So I'm Holly and this is Bella. Hi, I'm Bella. And we're Two Times Confused, otherwise known as TXC to some people who may know us. I'm not sure how many of you know who we are, but yeah, we're from Wangaratta and we write and produce our own music, and yeah, we're gonna sing a couple of originals tonight, and yeah. The first song we're gonna do is Love It When You Lie, and it's a track off our debut EP called Two Times Confused.
Creeping around like you're not mine, finding a way to hide her, doing things you know you shouldn't. What was your excuse this time? I want you out of my head, I want you out of my bed, 'cause I can't look at you the same. Love it when you lie, love it when you lie to me. I don't know how you say it. I'm just right for you. You throw me away like a cigarette. Girl, you know that's the truth. I want you out of my head, and I want you out of my bed, 'cause I can't look at you the same. Love it when you lie, love it when you lie to me. I don't know how you say it. I want you out of my head, I want you out of my bed, I want you out of my head, I want you out of my bed. I don't know how you say it. I want you out of my head, I want you out of my bed, I want you out of my head, I want you out of my bed.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you. So this is the first song we ever wrote last year. It's called Bad. When we started the band last year, it was a really random thing. Holly was like, Bella, do you want to start a band? And I was like, okay. And here we are. So this one's called Bad. It's you and I. There's nobody else when they're inside. Yeah, it's our time to decide. Tonight, we do whatever we like. Ooh, to no good, 'cause you're bad for me. Yeah, you're bad for me.
You're bad for me, but it feels so good. Yeah, you're bad for me. Yeah, you're bad for me. You're bad for me, but it feels so good. We all know that I would die to see you happy, so let me know if you wanna go break the rules one more time. Twice a night and bleed to the Ooh, I've been thinking of the things we could do. Ooh, I've been thinking that we'd be up to no good. 'Cause you're bad for me, yeah, you're bad for me, yeah, you're bad for me, you're bad for me, but it feels so good. To you in my bed, saying you want me back again. I hope this night never ends, playing this all out in my head. Waking up to you in my bed, saying you want me back again. I hope this night never ends, playing this all out in my head.
Thank you. So this one is actually not on our EP. We just wrote it. Not that many people have heard it. It was going to be on the EP, and we're like, didn't quite make cut. The song's a bit weird because we don't even really know what it is. It's like write songs, and you're like, what the hell was that? But it was kind of good. So like, this is one of those songs. Yeah, this one's called Runaway.
You take it out my head. You know I don't want you there, but that is where you rest. You know I can't get you out. It's hard to be around you, babe, but I'm so glad I found you. You're slipping under my skin, and I wanna let it all in, 'cause we got some unfinished business. Yeah, this time is ticking. Essentials down my spine. Oh, you better lock your doors. We ran out of time. I guess I should've warned you. It's hard to be around you, but I'm so glad I found you. Ooh. You're slipping under my skin, and I wanna let it all in, 'cause we got some unfinished business. Yeah, this time is ticking. Oh, you better run away now. You got your spell on me now. You got my heart now, my skin, and I wanna let it all in, 'cause we got some unfinished business. Yeah, the time is ticking. Oh, you better run away now. You got your spell on me now. You got my heart now. So how's it gonna go down?
Thank you. And wait, what's that? Oh yeah, forgot. That's not the last song. Don't worry, we're still here. Okay. This song is called "Just Wanna Go." It's our third track off the EP, which is available on iTunes, Apple Music, and Spotify. And I think Apple Music and iTunes are the same thing. It's also on YouTube, so stream it if you want to listen to these songs again. Yeah, I'm awake now. I see your face now, staring back at me. Go through your page now, gotta erase now all the memories. I know it shouldn't be typical for me to feel. I can't help but be jealous of the way you feel. Maybe I just wanna go kiss her lips, 'cause maybe they taste like you. And maybe I just wanna go do all the things that I know you would do. And maybe I just wanna go, just wanna feel the way she did. And maybe I just wanna go kiss her lips, 'cause maybe they taste like you. I wanna hold you, I should've warned you how much this will hurt. She takes her hand now, wasn't a plan now. I just wanna know. I know it shouldn't be typical for me to feel. I can't help but be jealous of the way you feel. Maybe I just wanna go kiss her lips, 'cause maybe they taste like you. And maybe I just wanna go do all the things that I know you would do. And maybe I just wanna go, just wanna feel the way she did. And maybe I just wanna go kiss her lips, 'cause maybe they taste like you. She tastes like you, 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 she tastes like you. I know it shouldn't be typical for me to feel. I can't help but be jealous of the way you feel. Maybe I just wanna go kiss her lips, 'cause maybe they taste like you. And maybe I just wanna go do all the things that I know you would do. And maybe I just wanna go, just wanna feel the way she did. And maybe I just wanna go kiss. Our last song is a very special song to us because this is a song that got us a bit more notice, not very much, but a little bit. So there's a show called Flunk, and they found our song on Triple J, yeah, and it's now their theme song for their show, which is pretty cool. So yeah, you guys should go and check out Flunk because it's really good. Since you went away, kinda strange. I've been waiting for that call every single day. Am I okay? So what are you gonna do? Have you found somebody new to pick you up when you fall to pieces? I don't want that thought in my mind. Someone holding you all night and they pick you up when you fall to pieces. 'Cause everybody knows that I just can't help myself when I'm with you. So brand new. 'Cause everybody knows I'm just trying to make you see that I want you. Only you. 'Cause everybody knows. I've been waiting for you, babe, just to come around. 'Cause I'm so down, and I'm tired of these games. 'Cause you're driving me insane. I need you now.
out, 'cause I'm so down. So what are you gonna do? Have you found somebody new to pick you up when you fall to pieces? Fall to pieces. I don't want that thought in my mind. Someone hold it all night and they pick you up when you fall to pieces. 'Cause everybody knows that I just can't help myself when I'm with you. So brand new. 'Cause everybody knows I'm just trying to make you see that I want you. Only you. 'Cause everybody knows. I know, you know, everybody wants you. I know, you know, you're better off than me. I know, you know, everybody wants you, but nobody's gonna love you like me. 'Cause everybody knows that I just can't help myself when I'm with you. So brand new. 'Cause everybody knows I'm just trying to make you see that I want you. Only you. 'Cause everybody knows.
Thank you. If you want to come and just, this is a shameless self promo, but if you want to hear more of those songs, or if you want to purchase a CD of our EP from us, then just come and talk to us after.
We've got lots
And
of them.
we've got lots of them, so we can give one to you. And yeah, thanks for having us tonight. We really appreciate being part of this event in a place that we've never been, or that I've never been.
Thank you.
That was 2 times confused. So I guess I'll just let her do what she needs to do. So I'll introduce our panel guests for today. So I'll start off with Dana Pham, if you can come up. So I'll give you this.
Thank you.
So Dana, if you wanna, is it Dana or Dana?
Dana.
Dana, okay, I've been saying it right. So Dana, maybe if you want to give us a little bio about yourself.
Sure. So I'm Dana Pham. I spend a lot of my time on the internet and social media, blogging, writing for publications. I blog quite a bit on medium.com. So I mainly, a lot of my writings come from my blog, but I've also published elsewhere, predominantly for the Spectator Australia. And I blog on a variety of social and political issues, a lot of issues, you know, under the umbrellas of society, culture, politics, religion, mental health. So a bit more about me. I'm a lesbian trans woman. That's how I identify myself. However, I also prefer not to live in a echo chamber, and I like to use my blog or my blog posts to try to get out of my echo chambers that I tend to sleep in. I think in this day and age, with social media and what have you, it's easy to slip into those, you know, that kind of tribalism that it's easy to listen to others with similar opinions to yours, and it's a bit harder to listen to the opinions of others. And if you do want to listen to the opinion of others, there's that risk of ostracization, of cancel culture. I don't think it helps anyone, and I like to think that I'm part of that small cog in the works that's trying to get us away from those echo chambers, get us away from that tendency to cancel each other just because we don't like each other's opinions. I don't think it needs to come down to that. I think we've got a lot to learn from each other, and that's what I love to do.
Thanks, Dana. So I'll just get you to
Sure,
take a
thank
seat. So the next person I'd like to introduce is, is this on? Yeah, okay. Next person I'd like to introduce is Rain Dove. Rain, if you'd like to come and introduce yourself.
Thank you. All right. I've never been a fan of these things. They always feel like lightsabery, like wom, wom. But my name is Rain Dove. For me, a pronoun is just a sound. You can use he, she, it, one, they. I don't really care. I don't have a label for my sexuality as well. I don't like to limit my potential of whom I may love by the history of a sound. But that's me personally. Before we start off tonight, I just want to take a moment to have a moment of silence to say thank you for all the people who have paved the way for us to even be up here today. Those people who have lost their lives, their living, their family, their friends, their freedom, and their futures in order for us to be up here going through the more finite details of our community. Because before, the details were we lived or we died. So I'm just going to hold for 20 seconds if that's all right with everybody. Thank you. Before I take a seat, I do want to say I am so incredibly proud of you for putting on this event. And I'm so incredibly proud of the panelists that come up here. A lot of people felt that this was going to be a very controversial event. It is in some senses, but the reason why panels are important is because even if you don't agree with what somebody says, the panels are an opportunity for someone to say what they have been saying online and not hide behind a screen name. They're here to look you in the eye and be held accountable for every single fucking thing that comes out of their mouth in a loving way, in a communal way. And I'm so proud of the people for putting their comfort and for putting their potential reputations on the line to be here live with you. So I just want a quick round of applause for my fellow people. That's an amazing person. I'm a model, yeah, and an activist. And thank you for having me.
Thanks, Rain. And lastly, Arielle Scarcella, if you'd like to come up. I feel like everyone in the room probably knows who you are, but you can do a little intro. Yeah, she's almost all of this, so here you go.
Hi, does anybody not know who I am? Maybe. So I
Okay.
think we should say hi to the live stream, the 10 people that watch. But there's going to be 1 million people that watch after the fact.
Yes,
Let's put that out into the universe.
That's where June is right now, so you can probably say hi to that. Okay, so thank you so much, you guys, for coming. Obviously, in terms of what's happened, so everyone knows, like, we were part of Mardi Gras, and then we got booted off Mardi Gras. And look, I just want to take this minute to say that Mardi Gras holds no fault in this at all, because what Mardi Gras is they put on an LGBTQ events for Sydney, Australia, or for Australia in general. How it works is we do our own private events, and then what you do is you put in an application to be a part of them. So panelists, how it's set, Mardi Gras has nothing to do with anything. So I do understand that people are disappointed, or there's two sides of things, but I just hope that no one sends too much hate anywhere, because obviously, even though it's regrettable, it's really no one's fault. At the end of the day, we are still having the event because we do feel like this is something that's important that we do want to talk about. So first of all, I mean, Rain, how did you come to know about the event?
Oh, can everyone hear me without a mic? Oh, awesome. Okay, here you go. This one.
On the mic.
All right. So I came to hear about the event because this individual hit me up, and we were talking. And was like, this event's happening, and this is kind of the feedback I've been getting, and would you care to comment on this publicly? And I was like, I'll not just comment on it, I'll be there to support your space to have this conversation. Because I think that too often people do hide behind their screen names and they say some really bold things that really affect people's lives. And in order for us to grow, we have to grow together, which means sharing space together. And the fact that you're coming here and obviously putting yourself in potential danger to talk about these things, even though I know some people felt it was intense, I really respect that. I do. So I'm happy to be here, and thank you very much for passing on the details. Yep. Yeah.
Great. So I feel like the mic is just like not.
Is mine?
Is it working? Okay. So Arielle, I guess the first question I would like to ask is, in terms of the event, I know you were pretty excited to come to Sydney, Australia, and then afterwards all of this happened, and then you came out with that video that went viral. Can you kind of explain a little bit about, did you intend to make that video before all of this happened, or was it?
Do you want the truth?
Oh no, I want to lie.
I was gonna post the video anyway, and then that just made me want to post it even more.
So you already made that
Yeah,
video?
I just like threw the Sydney thing in there.
Okay.
I was planning on this, yeah.
Oh, okay.
It was time. Like I've been hated on by, I'm just gonna call them the woke progressive left, that section of the community for the last 5-6 years. And you know, it's at the point where it's literally, unless it's become very cult-like, in my opinion. If you're either with them or against them. If you even disagree on the slightest little tidbit, they crucify you. And I've never been a fan of that. I've had tons of lesbian friends even on my channel that I don't fully agree with, and I think that's a beautiful thing, because we don't have to agree with everything. Which you and I don't agree with everything. Well, we agree with most things, I think, and you and I agree with most things. That just kind of worked out that way. But like two of the original panelists, when they came on, I know you're shaking your head. I know, trust me, girl. I know. When people disagree with somebody, if you want to make real change, you take that as an opportunity to talk to people instead of just being like, no, I don't want to be with them. That's a cop out. That's to me, that's just, I don't know what the word would be. You're not trying to make real change. That's not an activist. But you know what? Maybe those girls aren't activists, but I think the three of us are. So it's probably better this way anyway.
I mean, I would say that everyone is an activist simply by choosing to live, because there's a whole world out there that's trying to make it so that we are not alive. So I would, yeah. But there's different levels of activism, and I say that in a loving.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
And in terms of like, Dana, when you said that there are things that you agree with Arielle and things that you don't, what are some of the things that you don't? Now we're going to get a little bit controversial here. So what are some of the things that you don't think you agree so much with Arielle?
We've had a conversation offline about some general points that we may or may not disagree with, and it turned out we had a lot of agreements. But
we agree pretty much almost like 90%.
I think there may be a lot of nuances we don't agree with, but you know, things that you weren't worth fighting over.
Right.
I think, if I recall correctly, the only disagreement we have is on trans women's participation on sports. I think we have some disagreements over that, but overall we have a lot of agreements, which I don't understand why a lot of the trans activists are getting triggered over. I honestly don't know what.
They would hate you too. You realize that?
I mean,
they would call you a transphobe.
I can answer why they're upset, if you don't mind. Just briefly. So one of the things when we put out this event, I asked people to send me their grievances, how they feel. But one of the common threads is actually just the language that's used around the things that you say, because the sentiments are your truth and your space. But the clickbait language, like saying, using the word girl dick and things like that, for some people.
That's what they call it.
But it's difficult because we're growing in diversity and our language is diversifying, and we're globally growing as a community. But especially when we're talking about space, I think a lot of people the one thing a lot of people said is that they felt the language wasn't considerate in order to get clicks. They felt like their anguish was being monetized, But that would be what I would say. very opinionated things very quickly, and a couple of things that you've even said, I tweeted that out a little bit too fast. I should have been in a different way. And you're very self-aware.
Oh yeah, no, everything that is up, I agree with.
Yeah.
If I realized it was dumb and I was an idiot, I take it down.
Yeah.
And that's I think I would have 500 videos if I didn't take anything down. I have like 300, so I say some dumb shit.
Yeah, and I think that's what people
But
are
like,
upset about
again-
because they're like, even if it's taken down, it's been said. And I don't want to talk over you. I know it's your time on the mic.
Well, the only point I'd add is we live in an age where intent doesn't matter anymore. Okay, so maybe Arielle could have worded things a little better with those clickbait titles, maybe, but intent still, well, at least I feel that intent still matters, but it seems that in the age of social media, intent doesn't matter. It's the policing, the control of language, which in itself is an erosion of free speech. I mean, you had mentioned earlier, everyone should be paying tribute to those who fought for our liberties and freedoms. Well, the most fundamental liberty/freedom is freedom of speech. Now, again, maybe could have been worded better, but intent, we've forgotten about it, and I see that as a real shame. And that's why, that's why we've gotten ourselves lost in these echo chambers, in these culture wars, and to hide behind a smartphone, to hide behind a computer screen, it's a luxury. And I think it's a luxury that's been abused for too long now.
Did either of you get any backlash from this? Like, I'd like to kind of know what.
What's your
You created your own hashtag.
So I did create a hashtag OKTRA, which is a play on hashtag OKBoomer. But for the record, I'm not. Hashtag OKBoomer is a hashtag I don't use because
It's
I don't.
ageist.
I don't find it particularly respectful to older folks. But I figured, if these particular activists, they want to play the game of language control, of speech control, and they don't want to listen to reason, which becomes very obvious as you try to reason to them. It becomes very obvious that they don't want to reason with you. Sometimes you just have to be quirky and be creative and just hashtag OKTRA, because there's no way to reason with these people. My audience tends to be diverse from across the political spectrum. They're notably more I don't really fit in any nice neat boxes anyway, so.
What about you, Ray?
Okay, I got an equal mix of backlash and concern.
Okay.
I had a lot of people caring about my safety in the event. I had a lot of people tweeted out there
Look at all these horrible people here.
well, a lot of people were like, is this going to be a safe space for me? And it's on it's in responses to things that were tagged in. And I first of all, I was very grateful for the sentiment. But this is what I do. This is my work. I was very happy to be here. And I did get some backlash, people saying, you are who you are affiliated with. And that, coming here instead of, there's another event with a bunch of youth. And they said, coming to this event, it says that I'm willing to affiliate myself with people who take us down rather than bring us up. There were some people who also had some opinions about your work, and who did some feel, and I was really down, and there were only 2 people who were willing to talk to me. And this person right there walked me through the whole entire thing, and they had absolutely no obligation.
It's interesting that you mentioned intersectionality, because some of the criticisms I've received is around intersectionality. And it's very interesting in that what we would call the progressive left, that space in the political spectrum, past 5 or 10 years, they've been very big on intersectionality. However, you then, there's intersectionality, and then there's some taboo intersectionality. It's like that saying, it's from Animal Farm, something along the lines of everyone's equal, but some are more equal than others. So it's almost like intersectionality is a thing, but some intersectionalities are more equal than others, which goes to the point that you raised about concerns about the intersectionality between the Christianity I practice, my political views that tend to be libertarian and conservative, me being a trans woman and me also being a lesbian, I'm just trying to remember the point I was going to make. I think the point I was going to make was, you know, for all the talk of tolerance and equality and all these fluffy words, there's more than just a double standard. And in some of the criticisms I received, when I did challenge it, they didn't want to have a debate about it. No discussions, not interested in going there. It's very dogmatic, and again, it's a real shame.
I think the funny thing about intersectionality is the reason it was started in the first place was to offer everyone an equal voice in the conversation. And the people on, you know, again, the woke left have basically went back to the hierarchy system. now it's not a straight white man. It's whoever's the most oppressed has this should be the loudest voice. And I don't agree with that. I think all of our voices matter. I think that silencing anyone else who disagrees with you is not the best way to do anything.
That's funny that you said like that we're talking about intersectionality, and I know this
That's
is
the reason it was created. Yeah.
I'm just gonna be really real here. I know it's gonna be broadcast, and I'm gonna be the most hated lesbian in Australia, and I'll never get a date again. But it's
Can't
funny.
be worse than me. So.
No, because when we started this event, and it was, you know, lesbians talking, and then we got backlash because we got people sending in messages saying, well, why don't you have an Indigenous lesbian? And then someone wrote and said, well, it's not very diverse because you don't have a disabled lesbian. And then someone wrote in and said, why don't you have a trans woman lesbian? And I was like, the stage isn't that big. But you can see, like, we're asking for diversity, but then it's becoming more and more. And I mean, the lesbians that we had on stage, was that not good enough? Are they, like, it's really funny that they wanted all this diversity. And then I was like, okay, so for this panel, and obviously we got Dana and we got Rain, and, you know, Rain's non-binary, Dana's a trans woman. And then I got backlash for that too. Because then now I'm like, okay, I'll do what you say. I'll bring in a more diverse panel. And then it was, oh yeah, well, you're just putting them on now for tokenism. And I was like, you can't win either way. Either I'm not diverse enough, or everyone's just a token. So
I don't mind being a token.
as long as you get paid,
that's how I
right?
make my living. Like the big campaigns, like Absolute, throw in some gays. I'm happy with that. Like seriously, like there's nothing wrong with being tokens. Like as long as they're supporting you in other areas. It's not just like the one time a year. As long as they're Absolute is sponsoring. They sponsor. It's acting like that this is the sponsored broadcast or something. But what was the original thought?
The original thought was just like,
these types of people, in my opinion, you can't please them. They're never happy with anything. You know, you can have. Are you Indigenous? You're from here.
Australia.
You're from okay, so you're Indigenous. Maybe just like hop in a wheelchair and they'll be happy. Like, but then maybe you have to be deaf too. It's like, you know, then they won't think that. Then there's like, where's the Black persons? You know, it's like there's not that many people. You know, everybody's voice matters. And the good thing about all three of us is that we also have individuals on our channels that talk. So if you don't get it on the stage, you'll get it, you know, in other aspects of our content creation.
I mean, I think it really comes down to intention. Again, we're talking about intention matters. I think it is so important when you have a panel to have different intersectionality, because otherwise you're sitting in an echo chamber and you do need to be able to talk about different things. I know that we're mad at this idea of the progressive left wing, but I want to say we have really gotten to a point where we never were able to do this before, demand diversity. We were never able to shut down an event before because just having the event was a big fucking deal. And now that we can have them, we want to have them do something that hasn't been done before, which is lift up voices that have been systemically silenced. And it makes sense that people who feel like maybe the only possible power that they might have to make that happen is their voice, use their voice as much as possible. I'm not mad that people demand diversity at an event like this. I can understand how emotionally exhausting it is as an event leader and creator, how difficult that must be. You only have 3 spaces and you're trying to represent everyone well, but you're trying to do it in an authentic way and have a real conversation. And at the same time, I just think that there's room for us to appreciate all of this. The fact that this event is happening, the fact that you are in charge of this, you pick who you want, when you want, how you want, and also the fact that people have gotten so passionate about this and we're able to lift up their voices. I think it's all wonderful and also terrifying, but also like there's just so much space for gratitude, I think, on all those levels. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I know it's complicated, but I'm just saying like everyone's like, if people are protesting this, I'm like, fuck yeah. And then the people who are showing up to this, I'm like, fuck yeah. And then we're like on the event and I'm like, fuck yeah. But we do want to make sure that there's a diversity of voices. But just existing is diverse.
Yeah,
But we have to be careful because of systemic lack of diversity, intentional lack of diversity.
See, like this event wasn't meant to be this deep. Like literally, this event was meant to be a couple of lesbians coming together, telling lesbian jokes. Why do we U-Haul on the second date? That was the event. Like it was never intended to be this deep. And the only criteria I had to be on that panel was you're female and you like girls. Like it wasn't like I never thought that it was gonna be this hard. So I just thought, okay, well, we're a couple of girls who like girls. We're gonna come together and talk about girls. Isn't that what all lesbians do in their spare time? So I was like, and then all this happened. I was like, wow, lesbians are complicated. When did we get so complicated?
When we had time to think about what lesbianism is. We didn't have this time before, but now we have time. We have time to really unpack it. It's no longer just lesbian. Now we're able to live our lives openly, freely, have our thoughts exchanged around the globe. You can go across another border without going out the threshold of your bedroom. We, for the first time, are able to be complex beings, and that makes your job a lot more complicated. I know it really sucks, but at the same time, it's fucking phenomenal.
So for everyone here, like there's no script. We're just going off the fly because every single script that we had for a panel has just gone out the window. Like, so.
I can guarantee you no one is offended at this event.
Okay, good. Is anyone offended? No?
Never.
All right.
They watch my videos.
Throw us up if you can.
Yeah.
If I could just add, the way this event, the events leading up to this event have panned out, it's quite telling in the sense of now, with what I'm about to say, I'm not trying to play the victim card or any of that, but it's a trend that I've noticed in LGBTQIA discourse in the last, especially in the last 5 years, but probably in the last 10 years, where I do feel, whether it's intentional or not, the L in the series of acronyms, I feel like it's slowly being thrown under the bus.
Can I add to you?
Mm-hmm.
I was gonna say that. The only reason I disagree with what you said about every event being diverse is because there are no lesbian events. That's why, who said that? Yes, Queen. That's what gets me upset. If there were as many lesbian events as gay boy events, as queer events, as anything other than lesbian events, then I would say maybe we can be more diverse. And I don't think diversity ever is a bad thing, but I think there should be more lesbian events. So when you're taking the one lesbian event away from us, it feels like an attack. And that's exactly what it was. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not saying that every single event.
No, I know. I'm not saying. I'm just saying. In this case, in this case, I feel like that's what happened.
Because the other side of it is just this reason why people are pushing for that. I understand all the sides of this thing, and I also understand that like a lesbian event the word lesbian itself has changed, and some people might say I would say it has in the sense that
for some people they changed. The people that use it have changed.
Well, there are people who are cis lesbians who believe that trans women cannot be lesbians, and and we have now really worked hard in privileged. Let's keep in mind this is a very privileged part of the world. I was just in Colombia, and people are still using they have handguns and stuff like that, and their mission and objective is to survive. It's really very different than this conversation that we're having now. But I think that the word lesbian, especially in privileged spaces, is starting to be more inclusive, is starting to be different. And now we're having intergenerational conversations. People who are like, for me, lesbian has always meant cis women. And we have other lesbians who are like, I don't even like using the word cis with women. And then we have other people who are like, I am a trans woman, I am pre-op, I am a lesbian, and that's what lesbian means to me. People, it goes down the line. It's controversial, but I'm just saying language is evolving. I tangent sometimes when I'm trying to
you're
get
fine.
a clear thought. But
I think
you can have a lesbian,
I think the fact that language evolves is good, but I think it becomes an issue when you expect others to live by the new definition when they've labeled themselves that thing for 20 years.
Well, language is
Yeah.
so fucking antiquated, isn't it? Because it has every single sound that we use in gesture is based on a history of anything that has ever been affiliated with it. And what we really need is a new language that doesn't have an affiliation to imperialism, systemic racism, sexism, etc. And it allows us to diversify and be our true selves. And really but the thing is, we're trying to cram all these things into one little sound. And it's not fair to do that. I think we need something better. I think we deserve better. I think that we keep pretending that we've invented everything that should be. And I think we can just do better. We need new language, new government. We need a lot of things. And we just have to stop accepting that this is the only thing that we have. You know what I'm saying?
A do-over on everything. So
I agree with everything, but it's not the way that things are. So that's
It's the way that things could be.
It's the way that things could be, but that's where it becomes.
So
Bad.
we're talking
Bad.
about we're talking about the word lesbian. So
Yeah.
what would that word mean to each of you? Because you guys, each of you
Well,
are
you don't
so
identify
different
that
in terms of.
I'll address it, but let's
So- Dana, I'll start with you. So in terms of the word lesbian, what does that definition has to you?
So for me, lesbian means a woman, by definition of her female identity, is attracted to other women. Now, you would have noted that I used the term gender identity. I feel like gender self-identification is a double-edged sword, and and when I say that, I understand the concerns out there that if we don't want to be going around policing people's identities, but how a line is drawn, I think I'm unable to answer that question. I don't think anyone's able to answer that question, and it's subject to an ongoing debate, which I also understand is important. It's concerning when someone says, "Oh, someone's identity isn't up for debate." What that tells me is, one, whoever's saying it is trying to police language and is trying to encroach on freedom of speech, which of course doesn't go down well with me. But two, if questioning someone's identity, doesn't matter if it's gender, whatever identity it is, if it's hurtful, then the question I would pose is, where is one seeking their validation from? If someone feels that they need to seek their validation from other people, from society, from if I felt the need to seek validation from every woman here right now that I'm like you, we're all women here, myself included. If I felt the need to feel that way, that's probably a more reflection on me than on everyone here. Because really,
it's called self-love for a reason. It comes from here.
validation should really be coming from within myself. So if, for argument's sake, every woman here believes that I'm not a woman, and I don't need to know your answers, that's not my concern, but for argument's sake, let's say that was the case. So what? I still know what I'm in here, and identity really is a tool of social negotiation. It should be socially negotiated between people freely, where no one's freedom of speech or freedom of thought is being trampled on. And if someone here, or more than just one person here, disagrees with my gender identity, well, I guess we can just leave it at that, because I know who I am and I know is of lesbianism, and I guess that's that. We don't need to cancel each other or any of that.
Well, it's the same thing with sexuality as well, because I mean, being a lesbian myself, I know going to work with a lot of dudes, everyone's like, oh no, you just haven't found the right man, you know, like no one believes lesbians exist, we're just confused. But yeah, they can say what they want, but I know I'm a lesbian because you know what you know, and obviously I don't need those guys' validation to know who I am. And I think that's kind of like similar. I wouldn't say it's like 100% similar, but it's something that you know who you are. So nothing anyone can say can really change it. So what's the point in arguing, really? So I totally get what you mean by that. What was the question again?
Definition.
The definition of lesbian. Sorry, we just got like one track mind here. So Arielle, so your
My definition is, I think it's a lot more societal than biological, regardless of what people think. I think, yes, usually it is biological to females, but I think if somebody is presenting as a woman and they call themselves lesbian, I wouldn't care. I would say, welcome to the club. But if you present as a man and are a trans woman, but you still present male, that would bother me, because I think being a lesbian means being seen as a woman, and being seen as a woman in society is an experience. And it's not just, for me, it's not just an identity, it's an experience. You can experience it societally, mentally, emotionally, and physically. And I think to say that she's not a woman at all would be wrong, because she is experiencing it societally. And I guess, I don't know, I'm not gonna ask your status, but you know, societally, you present as a woman, so you're gonna experience that. You date women, so you're gonna experience that. But for somebody, in my opinion, for somebody like her to say that she knows everything that we experience as women is also inaccurate. So I think there's 4 really different parts that make up the experience of what womanhood would be. I know you disagree. Go ahead.
No, it's all right. That's why we're here. We're here to have these conversations. And first of all, I want to say that for me personally, I think that language is a thing that's as fluid as gender. I think it's a thing that's constantly evolving. I think it's a thing that is cultural. I think it is location specific. And I think it's also incredibly personal to each person who says it. For instance, if I said blue, think of the color blue. I can guarantee you we're not all thinking of the same shade of the color blue. It has a spectrum. So both of your relationships to the word lesbian and what it means are valid and real, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
They are truth, and they are, they are like a set in stone, like a Rosetta Stone of what
Is for us.
what lesbian is for you. So I'm not going to say that that's not correct. For me personally, I think I don't have a sound for my pronoun, and I let people use whatever they want. Partially because I know that I have never been and never will be, and I'm only now and now and now and now. I know that I cannot be summed up by a sound. I know that I do get to experience what it's like to be treated like a cis white hetero man, and I don't believe that wearing a suit and having short hair makes me someone who is like, just because I'm being perceived as male doesn't mean that a suit and short hair is masculine in general, right?
Correct.
And I don't think that presenting societally femme or female equates lesbianism, like the ability to access lesbianism. I think that clothing is a structure. I think it's just architecture we're in our bodies. I think that sexuality is, it's important that people have labels, because those labels define limitations in which we might be experiencing or need to experience for something that is as intimate as having sex with someone. It's a really important thing, and people are allowed to have it. I personally feel that the word lesbian is whatever you think it is. It's whatever you think it is.
I think in culture that makes sense, but the thing is, it's also a protected class in law. So that's where I also have issues with people that believe what you believe, because you have to have same sex rights, like same sex,
But lesbianism is no longer same sex, right?
Under law it is.
Technically, you could have someone who is transgender and a lesbian.
Depends on where
and
you
in
are.
a relationship with someone, and in that intersectional dynamic, technically, you're saying that here it's not protected by law. If you're transgender, you're in a relationship with someone who identifies as lesbian. It's very different than trans.
Yeah, the laws are different everywhere. Yeah.
But personally, I just believe that, I think that we're just having a very complicated conversation, but I do believe that there is for me personally, there's no sound out there that can sum up the possibility of who I love. And I know what genitalia I'm good at navigating, and I know what genitalia I enjoy. But I'm just kind of here along for the ride and to experience my own truth and attraction.
Well, it just seems like, when we ask what's the definition of lesbian, like we just can't come to a consensus. So it is also complicated because depending on what you think the word actually means is how you might also project it onto others. So that's why definitions of word, I personally feel, needs to be known. Like, there's something like from this whole event experience, there's this one thing that I have learned is that the word transphobia means a lot of things. So initially, because look, I am not as involved in the community as, I'd like to be. So for the first time, in my head, transphobia would be, you just like, you don't believe transgender people exist, or you look down upon them, or fearful of them. Like, it's very, it's very harsh. Like, so if someone calls me transphobic, I take it as a personal offense because it means that I am a horrible person to a transgender person. And then all of a sudden, I've been labeled as transphobic, and I have no idea why. And someone actually messaged me over Facebook. Don't know how they found me because I don't really give out my name when I do the event. And they told me transphobia is whatever a transgender person tells you it is. And I was like, but which one? And so she sent me a list of everything that's transphobic. It was very long. And so I sent that list to a lot of transgender people online. None of them could come to a consensus. So some of them were like 1, 3, and 4 are transphobic. Some people were like, nope, 2, 5, and 6 are transphobic, and the rest aren't. And I was like, so what does that mean for me? Because if I think of everything on that list was transphobic, everyone is transphobic. So what do I do? And it's the same thing with so that's why I'm saying there needs to be definitions, because if people don't know what the definition is, then how do you know where you fall and how do you navigate in this world?
Is the word lesbian enough? Is it enough? Do we need something more?
Oh, we have tons. Butch lesbians, studs, femmes.
Yeah, and then you've got
boys,
the sexual stuff, like touch me
bottoms,
nots, the touch me nots.
touch me not pillow princesses.
So there's
I'm sensing some pillow princess vibes out there.
But I think because personally, I think because of the way that society has changed, and society hasn't changed just socially, but technologically, and medically. So that has changed the way the LGBTQ community kind of exists now, especially with more transgender people coming out as transgenders, and so now there's other things that we need to look at as well. And I know that you've used this word before, Dana. I saw it on one of your posts. Transbian, you call yourself. That might be a great word. Like, we could start incorporating that into the terms. Transbian, you can. Yeah.
But I suppose, sorry, that's too close. I suppose the difference between a word that I've put out there, a new addition to the language, the difference between what I've done there and what this stalker on Facebook has done to you is I've just put an idea out there. People can agree, disagree. In fact, what you've mentioned in me bringing up that term on some Facebook post, that was been a while ago, and I'm getting a bit of flashbacks because it was a while ago.
Yeah.
So it's not even something that it's a demonstration, but I don't get, wrapped around the axles over language. However, this individual who decided to stalk you on Facebook has just out of nowhere sent you this message and just imposed this language on you, which goes back to the point I made earlier about social negotiation. And there's a bit of discussion here about, well, what kind of new language, or what kind of new language, what kind of language society should get on board with? Well, there's a simple answer to that. In my view, it's the language that us as a society have agreed to use, be comfortable with in general, and come to a consensus, being comfortable with those definitions, like the lesbian terms mentioned earlier, like butch, femme. There's usually, I haven't come across any debate over what does, well, there is some debate, but it's very nuanced, but there's a general consensus as to what butch means, what femme means. And to your point about trans people not being able to agree with what does transphobia mean and look like, well, this isn't surprising either, because a lot of infighting that I've seen in the trans community is over disagreements like, what does transphobia mean? What does it mean to be a good representative of the trans community? And I've seen some very vicious infighting arguments coming out of these disagreements. So in the community, if we can't agree on these things, this stalker on Facebook, what right does this, in my view, what right does this stalker on Facebook has to come onto your Facebook, besides stalking you, impose this language that myself and others in the trans community, we can't even agree on. What's the point?
What did you say about when you emailed? I think you sent me a text message or something. You were like, if I'm considered a TERF, then you're worried about how the rest of the world, how the people are going to see the rest of the
Because
world.
if the
You said
trans,
something really
the trans community here, because Dana was like, because when I invited Dana to the panel, and I was like, are you okay with being on the panel? Because Arielle has, been known to be a TERF. And she's like, well, if Arielle's a TERF, she's the most harmless TERF.
Yeah, that's what I.
Yeah, you were
said
like
it
the
well.
most harmless TERF. So if we can't deal with Arielle, how the hell are we going to deal with the rest of the world?
In actual terms.
So yeah, so that was the one thing that Dana said when I invited her.
You sent that to me like, on Facebook. I think.
Yeah, I remember
You
that
sent it to
message
Facebook.
now. I mean, so if, and I don't believe you're a TERF, but let's, for argument's sake, say you're a TERF. Well, your TERFness goes as far as some titles of your YouTube videos that could be worded better. I mean, I write, when I go to work and I write documents and what have you, there's a lot of things that I could have worded better in the office. There's a lot of things that people in everyday life could have worded better to their spouses, to their children, and why don't they get cancelled? Why you?
You want me to answer that?
Oh, that was hypothetical.
I know. Yeah, I have an answer. No.
That was rhetorical.
Yeah.
Well, I guess because if that's the case, then I guess TERF is also on a spectrum. You're just on a lower spectrum of TERFiness.
No, I've got,
Turfiness.
TERFiness.
Turfiness.
Did I just coin a new word?
No, just the way you turfiness.
Turfiness.
I can't do it.
It's my accent.
I know. I love it. I can't do it.
bottom line is very nasty TERFs. You don't meet the standard.
No, thank you.
Just saying.
Let the record show on this day of, what's the day?
27th.
February 27th. You heard it first from a native trans woman of Australia. Yes.
She failed the test.
She failed
She
the
needs to
test.
retest. She needs to reset it.
So, Ray, you've been quite silent. What's
Oh,
your
I'm
whole
listening.
opinion on this?
I think it's
They're
important
taking
to
it.
listen a lot. I'm just thinking of all the people, because I have an audience that is definitely very vocal. And we learned this the hard way.
No, I knew.
Multiple times. I knew.
Oh, I knew.
In December, about my own personal thing, and then
Oh
also
yeah,
this.
and they can't try to cancel you.
Yes, they did.
Yep.
But fortunately, I also have an incredible support network.
Mhm.
Thank you. That looks at the history of my work, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
so grateful. Thank you. I'm just thinking of all the things that people have sent me over the past week. And the people who have talked about the impact of the language used. And I wrote down a bunch of questions to ask, because as much as I want to be up here and I want to be like, this person is not a fucking monster. They were there for me when I was down. They never once have like questioned me. I mean, you have really been a sweetheart to me and to other friends of mine who are trans and non-binary identifying or who have no label at all. But I would be doing a disservice to the people who gave me a platform that allows me to be here now. A platform I'd only have if they supported me. If I didn't think about them in this moment and what they want to say. And I think so many people that hit me up have just felt like your language could shift. And one of the questions I had written down was, do you think you could still make money and be as successful if you used less clickbait language when it comes to creating your videos? Is there a way to compromise and really have a couple of people from the community that you're specifically addressing and or potentially using in order to get your message out there, who can kind of verify each thing? So you are like, I'm putting out this video, I'm gonna put it past a panel because I know how much it means. And then not that you need a bunch of cooks in the kitchen, but they would red flag anything that they really felt might hurt people or maybe raise questions, and you can kind of go back and forth for a minute. But what that does is allow you to make content that really is communally involved and maybe something, I don't know. It's just something I'm really thinking
How do you know I
about.
don't do that already?
Well, I would like to know your process.
I do that.
You do that.
I do.
Do you talk about the people? I mean, I've seen that you collaborated with some
I talk
people.
to you. I've sent youth videos. I talked to my friend Natalie, who's a trans woman, Buck Angel, Blair White, Queen. We love Queen.
Wrong kind of trans, sorry.
Wrong kind of trans.
Would you be willing to I don't know, because I would be.
Let me answer the first question first.
Yeah.
So the first question was, could I still make money?
Yeah.
If I changed my video, my titles. I don't get much money off of those videos anyway because they're demonetized. And I think it's not really the right question to ask mainly. Like, I understand why you're asking it.
It's just what that was common.
No, I know. But the real question is, who's the audience that I'm trying to educate? Am I trying to educate trans people? No, I'm trying to educate cis people. And cis people aren't going to even understand most trans language. So I have to make it a little clickbaity for something that these cis people would click on to learn about the community. Like, I don't have that many people that watch me that are trans. Most of them are cis lesbians, bisexuals, gay guys, young queer kids, but most of them aren't trans. So they're here. Like, if I use like a specific trans, word that no one in it, that's very trans community specific, let's say, I don't even know, like packing, like no one's gonna click on. I have a video about that. No one watched it. I wonder why, because no one knows what the hell that is. So I have to make it more generic and more, I don't even know what the word would be. Accessible. That's a good word, but that's not what I'm trying to say. Not inflammatory, because I don't think my videos are inflammatory. And the girl dick thing, that was in reference to what they call themselves. Like, they use that language. Have you ever seen them? Girl call them. There's a lot of, there's a subset of the trans community that calls their genitals girl dick. So for me, it wasn't something that I came up with, because I wouldn't want dick on my page at all. So why would I say it unless it was in response to something that they already said? Did that answer your question? I think.
Yeah, I mean, I just, I think that you have some content that is really powerful and important, and I think that you're not this monster that people make you out to be. I think that when you're getting a massive and overwhelming response from a global community, that some of your content makes them feel some type of way, that can be both wonderful and sometimes things that you should ignore. But especially when it's coming from our community, there's always ways that we can look at something and say, how can I make this thing that I'm really fucking passionate about, that I really believe in? And also, maybe there's another way or formula or format, or even if it's having like a small little panel of people, because that's one of the things that I do with my content, which doesn't always make everyone happy, because they're like, drop the labels. Come on, the label is my life. It's a big part of my life. And I'm like, that is very fair. But having like people who are accountable for that and saying, here's the 4 Instagram handles to the people you can say have looked at this, and people know that you're not just, because it will help validate your stuff a lot more, and it will help show
I
that
could do
you're
that.
not
That's
just
such an
like
easy thing,
some
just like-
selfish, crazy,
Like editing the
clickbait woman.
description.
Mhm.
Isn't it also problematic because if they don't like Arielle's content and then they look at the trans women who have approved it, wouldn't they just go
Like,
and, those trans women,
But
I
then
mean-
it becomes a communal discussion, because if people have signed off on it, then we talk about what is that intersectionality, what's that snag? That could be just diversity within the trans community as well of opinion. But what's happening is she's getting dragged because people think that she's just sitting in her bedroom posting a bunch of things that people feel is transphobic when she's actually showing it to trans and queer community members, but people don't know that. And some of the things that happen and said that are more intense, what I'm hearing from people is they feel like you don't care, that you're just haphazardly doing this for some kind of fame, and that you don't actually care about the consequences of the words that you're using. And the trans community and the non-binary community, I'm not saying all of them, I'm just saying some people feel used, the sensitivity they have around their anguish about the ways that they've been treated are being leveraged for potential fame. And not that you're famous, but
I was famous before I made trans content. So to me, that's also kind of irrelevant. Like, not that you're, I don't mean to like say that about you, like not what you're saying, but
yeah,
like
I'm
what
just
they're saying.
vocalizing what,
No,
and
I
I
want
say
you
this with
to,
blood,
because no, this is good.
this is why we're here.
No,
Yeah.
I
got
respect it. No, I'm
Yeah.
happy that you're saying that.
Safe space.
Yeah. No, but my trans videos don't usually perform that well. If you actually go and check the catalog, my lesbian sex videos perform well, and I get paid for those. So, and that's the most fun. But the only time I talk about trans topics is when they have to do with women, unless they're friends of mine like Ryan and Storm, Ryan and Calvin. Like, I'll have trans guys on once in a while. At some point, they did experience womanhood, so that's again part of it for them if they want to talk about that. But if I think people forget that a lot of trans rights affect women, cis women, the most, more than anyone else. And that's when I draw the line, or that's when I feel the need to step in. When sex offenders that are not transitioned in any sense of the word are being allowed into women's prisons, that's a big issue, the big feminist issue with me. And I'm going to cover that on my channel. And what usually happens is everyone says, why are you obsessed with trans people? And it's like, no, I'm obsessed with women. And if I need to stand up for women, even if it's the trans people or the queer activists or whatever you want to call them, people that are doing, in my opinion, doing something wrong to hurt women, and trans women included in this, in most of the cases, if they're living as women, then I'm going to say something. I feel like there's so many people that agree with me that don't vocalize it. And if I have to be the martyr, then that's my place, and I'm going to do it.
Do you think that you say things in the most effective way possible? That really.
I think at the moment I do, but I think I grow, so I change the way I say things. That would be anyone's idealistic version of themselves, right? To change the way they say things if they feel it makes sense. But I don't ever, unless somebody's like attacking me directly, I'll be like, fuck off, But like I don't ever directly try to trigger people. And it's also not my responsibility if I trigger them. But they don't have to watch. They don't have to watch.
Trigger people to click.
It's their choice to click. It's their choice to watch. Like, this video is not about you. Stop making it about you. And if it is about you, maybe you need to talk to somebody to navigate your feelings about it. I'm not going to be responsible for the way other people feel about themselves. That's it. That's my feeling. And that comes from a long history of me going to therapy, working out all this shit, because I was a fixer. We started talking about this before you guys came here. Like, I used to date people that I had to fix, and I always worried if I couldn't help them, or if I could, like, how my being, whatever I was at the time, was affecting them. And then I realized my being doesn't affect anybody but me. And I mean, if you talk about law, that's one thing, but I'm talking about like feelings. My feelings aren't here to validate anybody else's but myself. You said it perfectly before. And I think more people that are sending you those types of questions need to take a step back and navigate that.
Yeah, I think that it's a mutual thing. I mean, you're operating as also a business, and a business as in like you're our content that we create in a forum is a certain sense of business,
Mhm.
right? People can choose to engage in that business or not engage in that business, to boycott or not to boycott. But I know that you are a caring person, and I know that you're a person who really has been severely impacted and hurt by how many people have called you transphobic, how many people have come for you. And I'm just saying, like, here and now, like in front of, you know, our amazing humans, I know you're always striving to be like the best community member. And I can't say I'm the perfect community member, but if there's a way that I can propose later on, maybe to help you in any possible way to make your content accessible, as well as clickable, as well as something that really helps heal some of these wounds. Maybe if it's just different types of, I don't know, different ways of approaching certain things, especially when it comes to trans and non-binary community, would you be open to?
I always am. I'm
Okay.
always constantly doing. I talk to you. I talk to. Like I said, I think that's also, people get that wrong about me. They think that I don't read my comments. That I'm constantly taking screenshots on my phone, because that just makes
I know,
it
I've
makes
seen some of the things that have been said to you, and it's
Yeah,
very
and
difficult to read.
yeah. But it you know, again, I'm not letting them validate me, or I'm not letting them upset me. Like, if a negative comment affects me the same way a positive comment affects me, I'm not letting it dictate my worth. Up to thinking of better ways to create content. I mean, it's my business. I have to think of that. I can't talk about lesbian sex every day. Like, let's be real. I mean, I could, but guess what? It gets boring after a while. You have to, you know, change things up, and the community's changing, and I have to figure out ways to, I keep using the word navigate, but you have to figure out ways to navigate that. And one of the things I pride myself on is the fact that I have such a diverse, in my opinion, I have the most diverse YouTube channel, like, out of everybody. I've had trans people that don't pass. I've had Black people. I've had white people. Well, we're going to film something when I'm here with you. You haven't been on, but you're going to be on. I've had 60-year-old transsexual porn star. Like, literally, show me another channel that has that. You know, so of course I'm going to fuck up. Especially when you have such generation gaps as well. You know, like, Buck Angel doesn't even call himself trans. He calls himself a transsexual. And like, that now is offensive, right? Like, to people that they're queer and trans now. It's like, I don't think that's offensive. Like, he wants to call himself that. Let him call himself that. Yeah. So I think it's a generational gap too. I don't remember what we were talking about originally.
Oh, well, I would just say about the fact that after this would be a continued conversation. And you should hold me, if you think there's a better way that I can represent and talk about lesbian community or anything.
I think you just need to, I think people in general need to.
And same thing, Donna, I'm sorry, I know I did not mean to sideline you, we just got really into this conversation. It's not fair.
But I also think, like, because what you brought up there was also, Arielle, some of your trans content was one of the, because look, I've asked people, why is Arielle transphobic? I haven't actually got a pinpoint as to why. One of the things was that you always present trans people, or so you're talking about like detransitioners, you're talking about
because most of them are women.
yeah, and detransitioners, you're talking about like men transitioning in prison to get into women's spaces. Jessica Yaniv, you're like Jessica Yaniv, Karen White, those kind of people. So they feel like every single transgender content that you're putting up is always negative. You're painting trans people in the negative light. I mean, like, what
If that's
would you
all
say?
that I ever did,
I mean,
I
like,
agree
what
with them, but that's not that.
do you? I mean, you don't agree with that? Like, do you not think that a lot of these
two trans
concepts?
vaginas, they were both lovely. Two of them. The second one was better, looked more realistic.
I mean, there's no way for
I mean, like, Arielle, why would like?
It looked like mine.
Why would you post, like, do you have a reason as to why you keep posting?
Really? She's like, I hate it. I was like, it looks like mine.
So do you have a reason as to why you post those kind of content up?
Trans, like, genital video?
No, like the ones
Negative
about the negative trans.
Because the same reason I posted the what lesbians think about bisexual video, the reason that everyone thinks I'm biphobic, because I have to call people out on their dumb shit. Like, if lesbians are biphobic, I will call them out on it. People think that I'm biphobic from that video because they didn't watch till the very end. Where I say, I think this is 5 years ago, 6 years ago at this point, but I think at the very end of the video, I was like, what if you met the love of your life and she was bi? And every single girl was like, yeah. and then the bisexuals had their turn to respond to that video. Nobody would have listened to the Bi Girls, their response, if I didn't post a lesbian video first. You know what I mean? That's just how it works for some reason. Nobody listens until they're responding. That makes sense?
I think the content that you put out there on trans topics, I think it's something, you know, whether it could be worded better, whether, you know, is it well thought out, well researched enough. I don't think it's a point that's as important as a point that you're making those contents on trans topics, and it remains important that, I think it remains important that you do so, and so do other women, other lesbians, continue this conversation on trans topics respectfully, of course. It's important because, I mean, let's go back to basics. So human society, you've got humans who, you know, this might sound a little long-winded, but there's a point to this. So human society is built on this dimorphic male-female template. So, you know, most people start off X and XY, and yes, there are other chromosomes types out there, but generally people will fit into the that dimorphic male-female template. That's a generalization, and yes, it doesn't make room for non-binary folks, but again, generalization. So so what I've referenced there is chromosomes, which then drives, you know, the human sexual development, you know, with respect to gonads, genitalia, which then drives hormones, and hormones drive secondary sex characteristics. Sounds like a sex education I'm giving here, but there's a point to this, because if you look at gender stereotypes, the stereotypes we have on male and female, well, where do they come from? They come from what I've just mentioned. You know, I just mentioned hormones and secondary sex characteristics, which all comes back to the male-female dimorphic human template that virtually all of us are built on. So then there's the gender stereotypes, which then drives gender roles. Gender roles are a manifestation of gender stereotypes. So the point I'm trying to make is it brings up this gender chicken and egg riddle, which I've written it down because it sounds better when I read it out rather than me waffling on. So the riddle is basically, and it goes back to, you know, the core of what it means to be a lesbian, what it means to be a woman. Gender stereotype behaviours reinforced by society simply because they are the expectation or norm of a dimorphic human template that I just mentioned, based merely on the way testosterone acts on the quote-unquote normal male brain and the way estrogen acts on the quote-unquote normal female brain? Or does it become the norm through the reinforcement of gender roles that are subconsciously created from our observations of naturally occurring gender stereotypes? There's a difference in the manifestation of similar characteristics in women that are driven by estrogen acting on the female brain, which are referred to as gender stereotypes, and a woman being pressured into behaving in accordance with expected gender roles defined by society through the projection of determinism onto gender stereotypes. The point I'm making here is, you know, with respect to gender stereotypes, with respect to gender roles, you know, the way we, us as a society, approach them, it isn't what is just hurting. You mentioned female to male detransitioners. It's also the same, what I would call residue sexism that affects male to female trans women as well. So I think the original topic was, I've lost track.
I don't know.
It was on all the trans video that Arielle was putting up with being in a negative light, and that's why it was problematic to a lot of trans people, because they're just saying Arielle's just putting out these negative trans video and making all the trans people look bad.
I think the better question isn't why Arielle is making videos that put trans people in a negative light. I think the more important question that they should be asking, which they can't possibly know is a thing, is why are a lot of trans women, well, I don't even know how to say this. Okay, so there have been at least 3 or 4 videos, I think at least 4 videos, maybe even 5 actually. 5 videos, we'll say 5, that I've posted and had up for a few years, and then these trans people started to be getting attacked, and they were showcasing trans people in a positive light, and I had to take the video down because they were afraid for their family. And I think to me, that's a bigger conversation that needs to be had than every once in a while I'm calling out trans people on doing dumb shit. Because as Rose of Dawn says, what did she say? Stupidity is intersectional. Everyone can do dumb shit, and I don't care what you are, I'm gonna call you out on it, especially if it affects women.
And a lot of the times you don't even say that these people, like, you don't.
I don't even think I don't think the male sex offenders are trans. So how is that even calling trans people out? It's not.
I was gonna say, it's like,
I just think they're stupid men.
because I was gonna say stuff like, the Jessica Unives.
Not trans.
Not trans?
Not trans. I don't think they're trans.
Do you know who
I
you're
do,
talking about?
and you're going to hear from me.
Oh.
He's not trans.
No.
And I don't think it's Jessica Unive. I think it's Jonathan Unive. I'm just saying.
No, it's like, no.
Because, look, I've come across probably hundreds of trans women in my time. They don't act like, quote unquote,
That's a fetishist.
Jessica Unive.
A fetishist.
Jessica
Which is
Unive,
fine,
or
but don't
should
call
I-
yourself trans.
Well, I should say Jonathan Unive, a pedophile. There's a theory out there called autogonophilia, which I don't really believe is pervasive. I don't necessarily believe it's a thing. But this Unive character is making it a thing. Like, this isn't a trans woman. Trans women don't act, I mean, yeah, trans women come in different shapes and forms, but they don't act like Jonathan Unive.
Here's the thing. Women don't act like Jonathan Unive. Like, I've never seen a woman act like that, trans or cis. I've never.
Yeah. So,
No.
so coming back to your video, so it's not like you're saying that these videos are not saying trans people are bad at all.
It's saying that trans person might be bad.
Yeah. Okay.
They might
individual,
be.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Rain, you're just kind of always
I'm
there, just like
listening.
listening. You're always just there, like listening.
Yeah.
So in terms of like all the trans topic, do you know what, like this was not meant to be a trans discussion. Same thing, like I said, when the initial panel was, we never really want to talk about the trans issue, but because of the protests, because of everything that's come up in the last couple of weeks, it's kind of made us talk about it, which is like really ironic, because it's like, oh, you're cis, you shouldn't be talking about trans. But then if you don't talk about trans, it's like, well, why aren't you talking about trans?
By the new definition, I am trans.
What do you mean?
I'm gender nonconforming, and that's under the trans umbrella. I'm not being sarcastic. This is actually the definition, like by the HRC and stuff.
So trans is just gender non-conforming.
It's become such a broad definition, and no one even knows what the hell it is.
I'm learning this too, so.
I'm just saying, because I made a video about that. Of course, I got hate for that too. But the definition of trans right now, drag queens are considered under the trans umbrella. People that are gender non-conforming, like you, and being a lesbian, you're not conforming to the gender. You're not conforming. You're expected as a woman to date men, and I don't do that. Does that mean I'm trans? You see that this is a problem. This is why language is important, and language is evolving. But we need, as a community, we need to come together and figure out what the hell we're talking about.
Because even now, like all of us, we're in the LGBTQ community, and we can't, and I'm still learning so much of this, and it's changing every single time I ask a different person, what's trans, what's transphobic, what's a lesbian, and it keeps changing. How the hell is the 95% of the rest of the world going to keep up with this? Because
this is why the rate of LGBT acceptance is down. It's gone down, I think, 15% in the last year. The adults need to start talking.
And act like adults.
For real. Hello? Hello? Okay.
It is working.
I feel like Rain wants
Mine's
to, like,
really loud.
I just want to make sure I'm forming this thought fairly and clearly. Yeah, I mean, thank you, first of all, both of you, for sharing and having this amazing conversation back and forth, I thought, in a really beautiful and respectful way. this kind of goes back to the first comment that I made in the beginning about the evolution of language. It used to be you lived, you died, and if you weren't famous or you didn't like run a militia somewhere, you didn't even get a headstone. You died. That was it, and you were forgotten. And for the first time, because of social media and the ability for us to connect with people all over the world, and for the ability for anyone to matter, for anyone to start a revolution, for anyone to suddenly become a face and voice of change, people desperately are adding their voices to the mix and trying to be a part of a revolution, and maybe not together. I think part of the reason why things are so complicated is because we have all these, it used to be like, we could keep things simple because we didn't have to leave our little bubbles. I mean, getting on a plane to fly somewhere across the ocean, it was really for the privileged, it was rare. But now we're flying over the ocean every day, just opening up Twitter. And all of our voices matter, all of our voices are on the table, but our voices are not interpreting the same words the same way because we're all coming from different places. This time our species, since we were tribal and nomadic, we are for the first time being connected again, and there's a billion people on the planet, and we all have our own truth and way of seeing the world. It's gonna be messy. It's gonna get weird. But if you'll notice, like over the past 20 years, how much we've evolved and shifted and changed, but we're evolving at a rate that has never happened before because of that informational exchange happening at a rate it's never happened before. So it's gonna be speak, or people who look like me were never allowed to speak, and I'm not just speaking for me, I'm speaking for everyone that has never been able to speak before. There's just generational and systemic rage. There's people experiencing ecstasy and joy. There's people going on fucking power trips because they've never had power before. And it's gonna be a little weird, but I promise you, if we all hang in there, we have conversations like this, we're gonna figure it out. Because it's not just a black and white answer. I mean, our community is filled with so many little diversities. We're this tapestry that just really needs to be fully unwoven, and then we need to weave it back together again. And we're doing the unraveling process right now, and it hurts. It fucking hurts because it feels like we're going backwards from everything that people have thought to get us. And it feels like the language that we've been using is not enough when we at all. You're like, fucking hell, I just made it to the finish line. Do I have to run another fucking marathon? When do I get to stop? When do I not have to do any more of this fighting? When do I have to stop doing any of this shit? Like, when do I just finally get to rest and exist? And we're exhausted. There's the activism fatigue all over the planet. People don't even, I think, really know what it means to be an activist anymore because there's so many different ways to be active. And I guess my full thought is just like, thank you for being here, and like also hang in there. It's so fucking weird right now, but it's happening. Like it's all working itself out, and it may not be anything that we imagined the queer community could be, but it could be something better, and it only will be that if we have these difficult dialogues. Yeah.
So what I got from that personally was.
Can I just say that every time they speak, it seems like a slam poetry. Like,
So I'm like, okay, that was
like
beautiful, but what?
And you have this, right? Like,
Yeah, like this energy. But personally, what I got from that was everybody get off Twitter. Like everybody get off. It is an angry. Twitter is so bloody angry. Everyone is angry all the time. It's like you write something and everyone's like, no, you're wrong. Like, and then they start calling you stuff, and I'm like, chill. Like, all right, I'll take it down, chill. And then you get caught up because you do get into these Twitter wars with people, and I am guilty of it sometimes. But then like yesterday, today, just going to the shops, no one gives a shit. Like you walk through Haymarket, you walk down the street, and no one gives a shit about all these issues. Like people are literally just living their lives. Like you ask someone what's a lesbian, and you give a wrong answer, or you give an answer they've never heard before, and they'll be like, yeah, all right, and they'll walk off. Like they're not gonna like stand there and like shout at you, because a lot of this is just really Twitter. Like honestly, like you were saying, like everyone wants a voice, everyone, and that's why I'm saying, honestly, when it gets to a point where you're getting into like really stupid conversations with people and yelling on Twitter, you need to log off. people just need to log off and get back into the real world, because sometimes I feel like a lot of activists, and I use that word very loosely, activists on Twitter just need to like go for a walk, like talk to the 95 percenters, because they don't care who you sleep with. Like you're saying, we are so privileged. We have Mardi Gras, for God's sake. Can you imagine having Mardi Gras in Pakistan? Can you imagine having Mardi Gras like in Saudi Arabia? Like, I feel like the fight that we've had for so long, the fight to be with the person you love, and then obviously recently to marry the person you love. I feel like we're kicking goals, and then what's next? It's like, and we're looking at it in a totally wrong way in pursuing activism. Is that, oh, okay, same-sex marriage in Australia is great. Now what's next? When we should be thinking, okay, we've kicked our goals. Let's go to Pakistan and stop people getting thrown off bridges. Like, that should be the goal. That should be the goal. Not like, and I'm going to trigger so many people over this. Not the fight isn't about what pronouns I have. The fight should be about not dying, like not having people die overseas, and not having statistically, at least 35 countries around the world, rape is still a thing to convert lesbians, and it's just a thing. It's a traditional thing. You don't get prosecuted over it because it's legal. Legal rape is still a thing in 35 bloody countries around the world. And when you compare that to, saying, oh crap, you misgendered me. I've been.
But it's literal violence.
Well, I mean, I've been misgendered before. Well, when I had,
have I.
like when I've had short
When I was
hair.
10.
No, like the rite of passage all lesbians go through. You cut your hair short, and then you put on your flannel, and you become really gay. Yeah, I've been misgendered so many times when that happened. Yes, it hurts, but no one threw me off a bridge, and I'm thankful for that. And I think the activism should really start looking at outwards now, because the Western society we've kicked all our goals. So I just think that the way that we're going about it is very, I don't know, like sometimes when I see a lot of the fighting over things online on what we can do and how we can help the LGBT community, I just like, that's so petty. That is so bloody petty. Because when you travel, like you were saying, you traveled to, where was it? Colombia.
And I've been to a couple of other places as well. Where it's
Yeah.
like, people look at us and they're like, why are you spending all this energy in fighting when the fact that you even get to gather and fight at all is amazing? We have people literally losing their lives, and it's true that like if you misgender somebody, it can lead
hurt.
to contributing to an environment in which somebody feels it's not worth living in. And that is a real thing. It's a real and valid problem.
Yeah.
Any conflict that you have is real and it's valid. We as a community, though, definitely need to be like, okay, does everyone have basic access to physical safety, food, shelter, water? Do we have it here? Great. Now let's make sure it happens everywhere. And when every person that's queer or every community that's queer has basic access to protections, basic access to the right to marry, then I really feel like.
Then we can nut out what lesbian is.
But you don't have to think that just one problem can be solved at a time. We can do all of this at the same time. We can have these conversations, but it's about like, what do we amplify as a community? What, like, it doesn't mean that we can't have conversations, say, about like pronouns and gender labels. We should still have these panels. We should also make sure that when we all throw our weight behind something, it's beyond our privilege bubble to people who haven't accessed that yet.
So Dana, what do you think of all this activism?
Which part?
Which part?
She's like, I just want to live.
I just want to live my life as a woman. Just like leave me
cream.
alone.
I mean, Rain probably made the point better than I'm about to. We should be looking outwards. We should be looking to Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, those parts of the world that, you know, people are still getting thrown off buildings, thrown off bridges, whatever the case may be. But the nuance still needs to be mentioned that, and you've already made the point, the conversation hasn't stopped in Australia just because same-sex marriage was legalised in 2017. There are other conversations to be had, such as, for example, it's overdone, but yes, pronouns. But a lot of the activists, they've gone about it the wrong way. And it's in a way that doesn't, it's like anything in life. You want to bring someone on board, like, change management in the workplace. You don't make change management happen in the workplace by just ramming it down people's throats. You give them buy-in, you bring the employees on board that, yep, we're going to go through this change of a company and it's going to be a bit painful, but, this is the benefits in the end and everyone's going to come out of it very well. If some of these activists took that approach, I think we'll be seeing a whole lot more respectful conversations over trans issues on both sides of the fence. So it's not, the onus isn't on, the onus isn't just on, say, Arielle to change some of the wordings of her YouTube channels, talk about superfluous changing of language on a YouTube channel, title, a video title or two. So in general, there are two types of people in the trans community. There are the trans activists who are trans themselves, but there's trans activists aren't necessarily those who are trans themselves. There's also the trans allies. So that's something to remember. So there are the trans folks, the leading voices who are trans themselves, and the allies who, I wanted to make this point earlier. If you, Arielle, wanted to build some more bridges, I would caution you with respect to who you would approach. And what I mean by that is the quote-unquote leading voices, the loudest activists out there, they're not necessarily representative of the trans community. Because in the trans community, we're a very complex bunch. Like, you've got some trans folks who they've transitioned and they just want to go stealth. They don't want to be identified with the trans community. They don't want, and I understand where they're coming from. They don't want people to know about their history. And I can respect that. Of course, one of the infightings is that stealth doesn't help the trans community, even though, it's their life. If they want to go stealth after they transition, it's their right to go stealth. This is one of those petty things that is fought about in the trans community. And, there's other trans folks who have political and social views that doesn't exactly align with the quote-unquote progressive left narrative that is driven by the trans activists, the overzealous trans folks and trans allies, who support your channel, who support Blair White, who support all these other contrarian trans or trans-friendly voices. And I've been approached by them and some of them have come to my blog or the other social media work I do because they want to run away from that, but they also feel like they can't voice it, otherwise they'll be ostracized by the same community that they rely on social support for.
That's what became a hashtag wrong kind of trans.
That's correct. Yeah. And so
it's not about being trans, it's about sticking with the narrative. This is not even working anymore. Is it working? Yeah. Sorry. It's about sticking with the narrative that these people have set for you, and most of them, in my opinion, aren't even transsexuals. They're not even actual binary trans people. A lot of them are young kids, as you've seen, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. A lot of them are young kids that I think genuinely do mean well. They want to make a difference. They want to feel like they're a part of something bigger than what they are. And I think they're latching themselves onto the trans movement because they want to help people that they feel are oppressed, which is great. But I think the way they go about it is hurting everybody. I mean, it's showing in polls. The rate of acceptance is down.
And, you know, really, I mean, to answer your question, really, those activists should be coming on, you know, on a couch like this, having
No,
this kind of conversation.
That's the thing. Like,
They
I almost kind of like wish there were protesters, because then they can come in and like ask you or like accuse you of.
If you watch Blair White's videos, they're never interested in conversations.
Oh, okay.
They're interested.
Well,
they're
we don't.
interested
We
in
want. We don't want
educating you,
streamers. We don't
Not
want
having a
streamers.
conversation is a big difference. When you're trying to educate somebody, you're suggesting that your opinion matters more, or what you think matters more than them, and that's not the way to change minds.
Yeah.
You have to come at it from believing that you're an equal.
Okay, so I'm just conscious of time. I just want to see if anyone wants to ask a question,
Yeah,
throw a
please.
comment.
I know we've talked a lot about trans issues. Any lesbian-related comments or questions?
This is the Donna show.
That's
Hashtag Arielle's not a turf. That's part of it.
partially
It's gonna
it.
be on my gravestone.
Yeah.
Not a turf. She lived and she died. Not a turf.
Can I ask a question? Anyone wants to answer? You mentioned trans women not being trans women in the corrections, like in jails.
Mhm.
And at the beginning, the very, very beginning, something in sport was mentioned.
Mhm.
What are your opinions on trans women in sport? Given that I'm 5'11", built like a brick shithouse, and I'm probably bigger than most women. But up against you, like, and I'm born a woman, so I'm not trans, but what are your opinions on female trans in sport against females, cis females?
What's my opinion on it?
Both and
I think that it's not going to be true for everybody, obviously, because we have some people that are born female that are 6'3", like, and we have somebody like me that's 5'1". But the truth is, scientifically speaking, majority of males, if you go through male puberty, you will have biological advantages. Your denser bone density changes, and yes, HRT. If somebody is on HRT for a very long time, it does reduce their strength in many ways, but they still have physical advantages in a lot of ways. I think there's an argument, and I think I would agree with it, that if somebody doesn't go through male puberty, because essentially, I hate saying it this way, little girl and little boy bodies, I hate that, sounds weird, but like they're basically the same besides genitals until puberty is what makes men grow. Testosterone really is what makes the changes, because other than that, I have friends that are trans guys that play ice hockey, and even, you know, it's not just the testosterone, but testosterone levels do matter a ton. And they said that, you know, when they transitioned, they started HRT and they went on testosterone, they could run laps around, you know, their past selves. Like there's no comparison. That's just how it is. And I think when you have things that are happening now, like, again, there has to be a line drawn, and I'm just not happy with where that line is being drawn currently. Because the truth is, it doesn't have to do with being trans. It has to do with puberty, and what that means for each person's body. There's a case right now, I don't know if you guys are following it, in Connecticut, where these two cis women, or maybe 3 cis women, are suing the Board of Education for allowing 2 trans women or trans girls, they're like 16, 17, for allowing them to compete against them. And they haven't been on HRT at all. You have a clear advantage, not every single time, most of the time. And I think maybe, I think the best way to go about it is maybe have an open category, and then have just a female category. Because I don't think it's an issue for trans guys to compete against men because they're at a disadvantage. But when you're taking away we're still trying to get women's sports, out in the open. Katie Sowers, my friend, is the first ever female coach to make a Super Bowl. Like, she had a Microsoft commercial. That was huge. And to take that away from young women just because someone, identifies as a woman and, is a trans woman, but isn't, doing the work, so to speak, I would disagree with that. I don't think that's the right way to do it.
So the rules across sporting organisations in Australia, in different countries, at different levels, including internationally, and even between different international sporting bodies, the rules surrounding what criteria do trans women have to meet before they can compete at the elite levels, it's inconsistent. So when you mentioned those, the Connecticut case, I think the criteria laid out by the International Olympic Committee is you need to have your testosterone levels at a certain level that's within more or less the female range. So that's an example of a professional sport. Well, I wouldn't even call it professional, it'd be an amateur sporting body because it's a school level. Deciding that, no, we're going to disregard the International Olympic Committee. I don't know why you would do that, because in terms of international sporting bodies, you don't get any bigger than the IOC. Don't know why you would ignore them, but anyway, so it's those inconsistencies that creates the controversy, that creates the issues that you've highlighted. What also creates the issues is those who are pushing gender self-identification and just not knowing where to draw the line, just not knowing where their limits are. There's a cyclist, Rachel, McKinnon. I remember, yeah. So Rachel McKinnon made a comment on some, I think it was Sky News interview, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, where I think she said something about, why does she have to be on HRT in order to compete with the other women? I think that was the comment she made.
Isn't it a very male thing to say?
Well, if I dare say, it's a form of male privilege to push out.
Yeah. You would never hear a trans guy say that.
Didn't they also, I don't know, it was Rachel McKinnon, but didn't someone just say, well, the girls just have to train harder?
Yeah.
Was that her?
That was one of the two runners.
Right. So it's comments.
They said
So it's comments like that, but doesn't help the discourse, and it comes down to the what bridge are you building? You're not helping people understand that there are ways you can set the rules under these sporting bodies that can make it as fair as possible. Another point I'd make is as trans people in general are transitioning younger and younger, that should address the puberty issue that was raised. But that's obviously a longer term issue. But really it comes down to sporting bodies making up inconsistent rules and people like Rachel McKinnon well, it's clear that she's trying to take advantage, which is unfair. And it's a very poor representation of a trans community while she's at it.
And I think it's also the trans community, because it is a small community, they're just backing trans people due to the fact that they're trans. Whether they're good or wrong, right or wrong, you just got to back them. And I think that's very dangerous because then you show that, it's like you were saying, Arielle, it's a hive mind kind of thing. It's a safety net.
No matter what they can't do, they can do no wrong.
Yeah. So look, doesn't matter if you're in a minority group. If you're doing something stupid, you're doing something stupid. You can't bring any of those cards out if you're stupid.
Stupidity is intersectional.
Yeah. So does that kind of answer what you're?
So Daniel, I don't believe that it's a fair playing field
of people aren't transitioned at all physically. Like, that's no.
I don't think.
I,
disagree
I think it's
completely.
I think it's complicated.
Like,
So
I don't think you're saying that we should ban all trans people from playing sports.
I didn't say
But
that.
no one said that. I think because we bring up one or two examples and people just jump to the conclusion. Arielle saying no trans people should play sport. Like it's always this like you say something and then people just assume something else. Like Arielle saying, "I'm leaving the progressive left." She never said she was going to vote for Trump.
Everyone thinks I'm like,
Everyone thinks she's voting for Trump, but like all she said was,
It's a
"I'm leaving
Gemini.
the progressive."
it's a lesbian joke. The one lesbian joke I'm allowed to make.
So that's the I think that's the reason why a lot of people are very upset is because people are just jumping into conclusions that are wrong. We're saying that okay, there are nuances in this whole trans women playing sports. Some people are taking advantage of, and that's why we need to speak about it and find some common ground. But we're not saying ban or trans people from sport. No one's saying that.
Or do we just have bad leaders, trans women, especially in sport?
and not only that, the mainstream media likes, well, not just mainstream media, social media, alternative media, they like to jump on that because it's newsworthy.
Yeah.
Bad news sells. I mean, what's another related example that's way less newsworthy is that personally I play badminton at the amateur level, and where I get unstuck is that I'm 170 centimeters, and when I'm facing a female player that's about anywhere between 155 and 165 centimeters, because of that height, so you need to watch badminton to understand where I'm coming from. So because of that height difference, I get into the habit of assuming that the other player is the same height as me. So I'll play badminton a certain way, whereas they'll play a certain way, and I'll get unstuck because of the height difference, which is something very nuanced. So not everyone,
There's certain advantages that you're going to have in certain sports because of the type of body you have. Like Michael Phelps has ginormous arms, and he just goes like this and touches it first before anybody else every time.
And Usain Bolt has genetic advantages that not many people in this world will ever get. So yes, those things need to be acknowledged as well. But I think we all know that it's the inconsistency across the sporting bodies with respect to their rules governing trans women's participation in elite sports, and the Rachel McKinnons of the world. There's your two problems.
If I may say something that is probably very much in line with the fact that, no gender, sexuality label, etc. I would also say that I hope that I dream of a day in which, we're born and it's not like it's male or female, it's you. You get a comprehensive automotive handbook on how to operate your vessel. And then if you want to add the social constructs or the labels or the sounds to yourself, you can do that as you grow. That would be a dream of mine. Along with that would come the restructuring of things. Like, I think that the way that we separate sports, it has been important because historically women have been severely disenfranchised by the system, and it allows space for both, for all parties. However, as we're looking and seeing that it's not really anymore providing space for all parties, I do have a hope for a day in which we can maybe say that the way that we structure sports currently is antiquated. Maybe it's not enough. Maybe there are other ways in which we can restructure sports, whether it's creating different classes of people based off
Like
of
weight class or something.
and I'm not saying for all sports, I'm saying for some sports that could be a really beneficial thing. Right now, people, especially when it comes to sports, they care about performance. Performance is a big thing, but even more so, we're starting to care about people's stories. And I think that there's a cool way that we can kind of look at the way we structure sports and the way that we have player stories, and we can find ways in which we can be more inclusive, more co-ed, without also erasing the achievements of people who have been historically disenfranchised. I'm not going to give you the solution of what that looks like. I'm just saying, I know it's possible. It's just, we have to sit down and have more conversations like this.
Yeah, like there's definitely a difference between a trans woman like that would look like me versus Mary Gregory. Do you know who that is? She looks like Hulk Hogan.
I prefer not to know.
You don't want to know. She's the trans woman. Maybe I think she probably is trans.
See, I can never. I
That
don't
broke
think
like
I.
5 women's records or something.
Just responding
and
to
they were taken
Wayne,
away from her, by the way.
I don't know if I can agree with like, you know, a baby being born and they're just like nothing. Like I find like maybe I'm no not nothing, but like they're numbers.
Purest form. Imagine if you were born, right? And it wasn't like it wasn't like, because the first thing that happens is when you're born, one of the first divisions that are placed on you is it's a boy or it's a girl, and that determines a lot about the way you might be handled in your life, right? But imagine being born into a world where it's like, because look, we're both born with the big F on our birth certificate, right? They just slapped it right on. But there is very little in common about us aesthetically, physically, the way we orgasm, the way that we feel, the way we perceive the world. I think that if you got rid of that gender construct and you let people get born into the idea of this is you in your purest form with no limitations of anything other than the fact that you are you, and this is a highly deconstructed version of your body, in an automotive manual that would have like your everything from your genetic history to like your blood type. Not only will we have a better understanding of you're not an angry woman, maybe you're somebody with different levels of hormones, different genetic traumas. We would have better mental health care. We would have better medical care because you wouldn't be treated generally as a woman. You're not just going to take women's supplements. You're going to take things that are tailored specifically to you. And we have the ability to store vast information like we've never been able to do before. The world shouldn't homogenize us. It's lazy. It's frankly stealing from you the tailored individual attention and experience you deserve to have. And if you are like, hey, for me, as you get older and you understand the world, for me, you know what? I was born with this particular part, and for me, I am a female, then that at least you're treated as you throughout your life, but you get to adopt that history, that legacy, that relationship, even the social constructs of what you want, by choice instead of by force.
Yeah, what you're saying is nature. What she's saying is nurture. You're both agreeing, though. You're saying biological sex is real, but you're saying it shouldn't be.
Yeah, so
forced upon us.
why I get confused is because if you're born with, if you're not female or male and you don't have a blueprint, I feel like it's fine to have a blueprint, but it's also fine to deviate from the blueprint. Because if you don't have a blueprint in the first place, how the hell would you know what's female and male when you get there?
Your blueprint is your individual vessel. It's not the idea, because what do we really get from saying it's a boy or it's a girl? We get an idea of what a boy or a girl is based off of anyone who's ever been a boy or a girl.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
that's
I think we
okay.
get like healthcare knowledge from it because there are certain like diseases that women would have that we would need to know, like you know, like breast cancer, for example. Like we know that would affect women more than men versus like prostate cancer. I think it's like relevant for things like that. But you are your own person, of course. But yeah, we do deviate from our societal norms. And I think that's what's great about our community as well. Because there's just so many, everyone's so different. But
what if someone said, "Hey, look, you're driving a Volvo. It has these particular parts, and because of that, these parts may be susceptible to certain
don't
things."
agree with that.
I don't even know if I want to
But
be.
I mean, like,
I don't want
that's
to.
applies,
No,
you know?
I don't know if I would like to be compared to a Volvo.
I don't
Like,
mean like Volvo, I'm just
like
saying,
the thing is, like, because you're
body
saying like
as a
we're
vessel, as a
we're
machine.
breaking it down to like it feels so robotic though. Like, there's no humanity in it. So when you're born and you're, even though like boy or girl, I feel like now society has developed a bit more where, okay, so there's a nice little structure for a boy, a nice little structure for a girl. But when people deviate from it, as long as no one cares, no one gives a crap about if you deviate from the norm. You can have an effeminate boy and that's okay. You can have a tomboyish girl, that's okay. But like it comes down to the point where it's like when we were talking before about how things have definitions, things have structure, but it's okay to deviate. But if there's
But what if
nothing,
but
then
don't you think sometimes that the fact that the road has been created by like, what if we didn't have to deviate? What if we didn't have to take a risk? What if all we had to do was just be ourselves in our purest
then we
form?
would be so confused.
Or maybe we would be free, because I wake up every morning, free falling into society, feeling incredible, because I know that I don't have this limitation of language on me, and that's my personal thing. It doesn't work for everybody.
I think
But
some
for me
people,
personally.
I think some people can
Yeah.
function better that way, and some people.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the fact that but the fact that you have to deviate from anything at all, like what's the harm in saying you're you, and then saying, okay, because you have these particular mechanics and also this genetic history, because if you have certain genetic history, you might be more susceptible to breast cancer than others. And imagine if you went to a hospital and they weren't like, okay, it's a girl, bring her over here. They were saying, okay, it's you. And they're able to pinpoint what you need more than ever because they can store very personal information about you instead of like homogenizing you as an idea. And also a lot of people get misdiagnosed because they're homogenized with the idea of like, all right, it's a man, he's likely to have these things. And people actually get misdiagnosed because they're homogenized, or even especially with mental health, people are misdiagnosed because they say all, in a lot of countries especially, they say all men have to behave this way, and if they don't, they have a mental health issue. But imagine just for a second, you're born, you know that how you function, and the humanity in it is not this. The humanity is this. It's the way you process the world, the things that you love, the things that you're passionate about, the things that you feel, the hopes that you have. That's your humanity. But this shouldn't determine how you can. This shouldn't determine much of like what you deserve to receive in the world. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't think she's saying that either.
Yeah, all I'm saying, that's, no, I'm just saying, it's probably,
Past each other.
I feel like Rain,
disagree.
I feel like Rainey's like, I am here and her enlightenment is like, I haven't reached that yet. I can't see, I'm sorry, I can't see that yet, yeah.
I don't mean to bully.
No, I'm just saying like,
Past each other. You're
yeah.
saying the same things in different ways.
okay.
You're saying this. You're agreeing. I promise. I said that before you even talked. I was like, you're saying the same.
It's happening to a certain degree when parents are deciding not to disclose the sex of their baby.
The babies.
Yeah.
They call them babies.
I don't agree with that either.
Yeah, so there is, and there's some celebrities that have decided to not come out with the sex of the baby when it's born because they want the child to grow up and decide whether it likes trans.
I think
But that's not,
this
that
is,
has nothing to do with
I
sex.
feel like
It
that
has
we
to do with
will see the
gender
effect of that. We will
expression.
see the effect of that maybe in 10, 20 years time, and then we can have this discussion again. Because right now it's literally an experiment now. The babies now that are born, we'll see how they develop and how they behave and how they socialize maybe in 10, 15 years time. And then we can say, because right now we can't. Like maybe babies are great, but we don't know yet. Like this, it's kind of all kind of experimental at the moment.
The only comment I'd make is, as much as I like to agree with everything that you've put out there, Rain, my caveat is that children need some sort of structure. So what I talked about earlier, the human dimorphic template of male and female, it's just a template, but the structure can change. I mean, without going down the Volvo path, you build the foundations of home, and then later on you want to make renovations and all those fancy things you want to do to a home. Well, as long as you've got some sort of foundation, so children need some structure. And if a structure needs to change, then that's okay. That can come, when the need arises. But I think we shouldn't assume that they don't need a structure, they don't need a template, they don't need anything.
Kids are dumb.
I'm not saying have no structure. I'm saying what if structure was structure was different? What if it wasn't, you should do this because you're a girl, and because saying that
No,
to make
that's sexist.
renovations.
I don't think people
Right,
do
it's
that.
sexist.
People still do that.
But what happens is people conflate gender and sex, right?
Correct.
And then on
That's
top of
why I'm
that,
saying you're saying
sex
the same thing.
is not necessarily a binary thing. We do have some things with intersex and things like that. I'm saying, what if the structure was something that wasn't binary? What if the structure was about being a fucking compassionate person, being a person who doesn't murder or steal or rape or cheat? What if the structure was something that was more
Me too.
educational and it wasn't
Yes, me
like
too.
you have to do this because of your body parts, but rather you have to do this because it's right. Because what's happening is it's a really privileged thing. And I say this with so much love. This is, but I think when you tell people, well, you have the house and you can renovate it, it's so privileged to make renovations. I've been to some really conservative parts of the world, and these people cannot afford to make renovations. They can't afford to deviate from the path. They'll be murdered. they can't afford to change anything in their lives that has already been in existence. And it's easy for us to say, like, well, here we are in Sydney. If you don't like it, and when you're at your parents' house, just fuck off and change the world. You can't do that in so many parts of the world. And so if we changed the way that the basic structure was, and we made the blueprint just, you're here, and the structure, don't be an asshole. And we made structure a lot. I'm not saying I have the solution for what that structure is, but I think we can give people that element that you're saying is important.
I love how optimistic you are, because I'm
I
like,
think
I'm more of
I know
a
it's
realist,
coming.
so it's like,
I think
I can't
everything
see
is
it.
different.
I sound like
Yeah.
those people that's like, the flood is coming, the end of things, except it's the opposite. I know, I see it, it's happening. I know, it's gonna, things are shifting, and
I think for some
I
people,
wish I
it-
could move faster, you know?
for some people
So,
it works, and I think for some people like me and a few of my trans friends, being structured helped us realize that we were different.
Mm.
Yeah.
So I think it just maybe depends on the type of person that you are. Because for me, being feminine, and I'm still pretty femme, I think, but being pushed to be more and more femme made me realize that it didn't feel right. Not because I wasn't a woman or a girl, just and I think that's partially biological, because why do lesbians kind of act the same around the world, and like no matter where you go, like gay men kind of act the same, like, and there's got to be some biological reason for that. I don't think it's all gendered. I don't think it's all structured because of gender or gender expectations. I think there is some biological truth to why lesbians tend to be more masculine, why gay men tend to be more feminine. There's got to be something there, because you go across the world and like before the internet, and they act the same. You're like, so it's like something's got to be in their blood.
So, I mean, in conclusion, Rain, I would love to live in your utopia. If that ever happened, you gotta invite me. And we'll probably try to have that happen as soon as possible. But I don't know. I'm just too much of a realist to see it at the moment. But we're gonna have a conversation after this.
I'm being a realist.
Yeah.
I am being a realist.
Yeah. Okay. So time conscious here again. We're going to wrap it up. So I mean, how do you guys feel as though like progress has progress been made? I mean, in terms of these conversations, do you reckon like we've touched on enough topics, or do we have to go till midnight?
Unless there's any other questions.
No.
Do you feel like progress has been made here tonight?
I just want us to come on a consensus of the word lesbian.
Yeah.
I feel like that's just like,
I
it's women who are interested in women or identify as women. That's what I think, personally.
I think now the word lesbian is
The line-
overarching now.
It's what, sorry?
It's overarching. So like there's lesbians, there's cis lesbians who love cis lesbians, and then there's transbian. I want to use that word. And then there's transbian, but everyone is under the umbrella. And the thing is, so a trans.
So I just feel like he's just been sitting there. He's over there fucking crazy. Like,
I feel like, a trans woman, because a lesbian is, as you say, a woman who loves women. So as a trans woman, they know they're women. So when they fall in love with a woman, then they consider themselves a lesbian. And I see nothing wrong with that.
for the word lesbian to be defined, you have to define the word woman. And that's where things get really complicated. Because it's become such a broad term that there's no definition for it. That's what I have a problem with, because we are technically we need to be a protected class, this protected sex class, because the truth, and this is the truth. I don't know if you know this. I don't know if I want to bring this up now, but I'm going to do it anyway. But there aren't as many, like, women are the most, not the most hated. What's the word?
Well,
It
goes back to what I brought up earlier about
You know
gender
what I'm saying?
stereotypes and gender roles. The cards tend to be stacked against women.
yes.
I mentioned earlier about how in the last 5 to 10 years, of all the series of acronyms, L seems to be
Always.
thrown under the bus compared to all the other letters in the acronym. That's just one example.
Yeah. But yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
I mean, I think we can all agree on what a lesbian is. We just can't agree on what a woman is at this point.
You can't have
But-
one without the other.
Yeah, but I believe
To me, the most important part of being a woman is not being viewed as a man. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If you look like him and you call yourself a lesbian, I disagree with that.
Yeah.
I think you have no fucking clue what being a woman's like.
I mean,
You don't live that life.
There's definitely some butch lesbians out there who do.
But they still have physical, they still have emotional, they're still their hormones, you know, these are
Yeah,
like.
but you're saying
again,
looks like him.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of butch lesbians and studs who pass.
Who have
as-
beards?
There's definitely.
I don't know any lesbian that has a beard.
There's definitely people with, like my friend Harnab Kaur, amazing person. She has a full out beard. Full out beard. If you look her up, she's amazing. She has a full out beard. She's AFAB, and she's amazing. But she spent a lot of her time. People think that she's a sick male because she has just this beard. She would out beard you.
I'm already
you know?
jealous. Yeah.
But I think it goes deeper than the physicality. You know, I think
Well, that's what I said, because it's
the physical,
it's
I
four
mean,
things.
perception, not
Yeah, it's four
physicality.
things.
Like that.
But it's four things: mental, emotional, physical, societal. That's. I just came to that conclusion.
And Arielle will put out a video on that, so.
It's gonna be
Yeah,
called What is a Woman? It's gonna be
so I
and it has
think,
2 trans women in it that agree with me.
I think we need to wrap it up so we
Of
can
course.
like, but I feel like, you know,
Kind of trans.
I really do want to take this opportunity to thank everyone that came. I know it's a bit controversial, and I hope you guys don't
Is
get
it
any
though?
back.
No.
Like,
It's not.
It's a very
You know, actually, we want to thank you
Yeah.
for still doing this event because, like, you know, when we saw that pull down all that, we were shocked because it's just like, we just wanted to talk about, I guess, I'm a
Just gay
lesbian and I
shit.
just
Just gay
wanted to
shit.
freaking talk about gay shit. Hey, and they, like, you know, really, like, you know, people really informing and, you know, influencing our community and stuff. So
Well, that
thank
was
you
what
for
it-
still persisting.
that was
and-
what it was meant to be, just
Welcome
lesbians talk about
Lesbian
lesbian shit.
Yeah, shout out lesbies and
Um,
everyone else as well, but just, you know.
But the thing is, like, sometimes being exclusive is okay. We can still have, you know, people can still have their own
It's not all about
space.
diversity.
Exactly. Sometimes
Again,
we need our spaces.
We need our
And we
need our
still-
space.
but-
We don't have to be. Why are women the only ones that have to be inclusive all the time?
all the time. We
All
always
the
have
time.
to make sure that everyone else is okay.
You don't see any trans guys at like gay guy events. They wouldn't,
Yeah, it's true.
and they should obviously, but
yeah,
like
of
it won't
course.
happen.
It is, yeah, it's very valid.
Well, once again, thanks everyone for coming, and thanks for, you know, just because like this has been a roller coaster, obviously, and thanks Rain, Dana, and Arielle for actually rocking up. I was really, because you know, panelists pulling out, I was like, oh crap, I hope they don't pull out at the last minute.
All I have to say is one of them is from BuzzFeed, and that should have put you off.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I wanted diversity. Okay, it's the whole diversity.
Buzzkill.
Yeah.
Y'all know this is live, right?
Yeah, I don't like BuzzFeed. They know that. They steal content. They've stolen lesbian content for years.
Oh, okay. See, there's a lot I still don't know. Like, see, this is my first event within the LGBT community, and I've already been cancelled. I feel like I'm kicking goals here.
Yeah.
But we did one thing did happen. I think that was positive, that progressed. We're all connected now,
Mhm.
and
Right.
we're gonna hold each other accountable,
And we're all gonna
communicate and
Exchange
hopefully expand this out.
Instagrams. All right, so I think we'll just wrap it up here. Thank you to all the panelists. Thank you to all the guests. If you want to stick around, and I guess Arielle and Dane and Dana, you don't mind, just take photos with
Oh yeah,
people.
you
That's
want
fine.
pictures on Friend's couch?
On the friends
Friends
couch.
couch.
Okay, cool.
Oh,
Yeah,
my friend's
I'm
couch.
playing and we'll just,
What'd you say?
don't worry. I was just shit talking.
Oh, all I heard was something you had to jump on. Right?
Oh,
I was like, I'm tired.
well.
Junie?
How do you shut this off?
Oh, it's already
Oh,
off.
sorry.
Oh, you
It's
turned it
already
off?
off.
Oh, thank you. Do you want to hold this over there?
That was long. I didn't even think
Oh, they're so hot. That one's hot. Because you were holding it. Oh my god, let me see your hands. Jesus.